Okay, I want to talk about these guys, the Beatles. Kind of continuing on off of like the Guided by Voices, Back to the Future thing. I'm not interested in decoding every movie, every band, Hollywood exposed. I'm not interested in doing that. This channel, I want to do, I'm really just doing an exploration of the nature of reality and the nature of humanity. Um, and certain things, I think it's counterproductive, ridiculous to not examine because they're such a big symbolic part of our culture, like the Bible, the Beatles, Back to the Future. Um, they're part of our collective experience. Like they frame our understanding of a lot of other things by these big symbols that we all have in common. So, any of these huge foundational cultural cornerstones, I believe, are going to have things to teach us truth, lessons, crumbs, whatever you want to teach, clues. They're going to contain them, if only because of the amount of attention that is placed on them. I feel it seems like the way attention works is it's almost like a gravitic force, like gravity, and the more attention that's placed somewhere, it's almost like the heavier it becomes, and the things we need to see are attracted there through the reality canals, through thoughts in the creators' heads. That where do thoughts come from? We don't create our own thoughts, we receive thoughts. It's not like we're like, next I'm going to think this. Okay, let me I'm going to craft up a thought. I'm going to have a thought about thinking about what I'm going to have. No, thoughts just come through. And we receive them. So I think anything that has a massive amount of attention placed on it creates like a gravity well. And these clues, these truths about reality are going to collect there. It was also one of my first like exposure to one of these topics very young. This and 7-Eleven. Because like I said, when I got sent home early on 7-Eleven, got the Sgt. Pepper's record, listened to this, and then like sure, it might have even been before I got into 7-Eleven. I mean, obviously it seemed absurd, outrageous, unreal to me. But I didn't even have enough of a framework of how the world works yet to really have any specific thoughts about what that was. But right after I got the Sgt. Pepper's record, like within a few months of that, I remember I found a book at some little bookshop, maybe in New Hope or something, and it was called The Walrus Was Paul. Yeah, The Walrus Was Paul. I don't remember the author, and it's not a great book, but it's a Paul is Dead book, and it blew my fucking mind at like 12 or 13 years old. Totally blew my mind. I know it's not a great book, but whatever. It was an introduction to the topic, at least. That might have been my first one, but around the same time, I became aware of at least the first iteration of like 7-Eleven Truth pretty soon after, maybe like a year or two after. I feel like probably around a year after, because I was really into punk music, punk and post-punk and indie music and stuff. So I would order CDs, compilation CDs or certain CDs from these record labels. I'd write to them, like send away from a magazine or a slip in the back of another record or something. And I'd order these things, but I would also just get other things in the mail, like advertisements, because just from being on mailing lists, from like ordering records and shit from all these like punk rock and indie music labels and stuff, like anarchist type labels, magazines, whatever. And so I remember like a year after I started, I had gotten flyers in the mail about 7-Eleven. And it was, Bush. It was kind of like the Michael Moore type stuff. But still, it was an introduction to this is a lie, this is what it seems. The world doesn't work the way we're told it works. Yeah, these are my first two, like Paul is Dead and 7-Eleven. Super young. Anywho, so we can all agree that, this is a cultural cornerstone. And I think we'll all pretty much agree that the Beatles are basically a complete fabrication, right? Tavistock, this doesn't happen organically. So we all agree they're a complete fabrication, but there's a problem, because if they're a complete fabrication of the screen, of the machine, then where did these songs come from? Okay? Where did all these songs come from? Because the machine can't write good songs. The screen can't write good. These people can't write good anything. We'll just call them police in general. I hope that doesn't offend anyone. But, well, we'll just call it just all kinds of police. Police, military, government, bureaucrats, intelligence, etc. All these people. We're just going to call them police generally. They don't write good songs. They don't write good anything. They don't make anything. We make stuff. We write good songs. We are creative. We write this stuff. And so there's a problem, because these are good songs. And I'm gonna, it's just good art. They are good songs. Like, besides the production, which, yeah, is insane, besides the marketing and advertising, besides the production that goes into it, besides the binary mind control overlays, besides all that, it's just good art. They're good songs. But they obviously are a complete fabrication, right? If you don't know a lot about Paul is Dead, it's on purpose. It is on purpose. All these things. You could, the conclusion is up to you, but the clues are there. This stuff is in it. You hold a mirror up to the drum head on Sergeant Pepper, and it says 1-1 Roman numeral 9. He, arrow pointing up to Paul, die. When you hold a mirror up to the drum head on the cover. You guys have seen this? You see this is the cover. You see they're all standing in front of the drum head. You got, Aleister Crowley, younger Beatles, all kinds of stuff here. But the drum head, if you mirror the drum head, hold a mirror right up to the middle, it says this. And that's the popular interpretation. 1-1-9, he die. But, could say other things too. That's just... But there's something with these drum heads, Got to keep an eye on the drum heads. Something going on there. And I mean, there is a lot of songs here in a short amount of time. This says in between 8 years, but I'd have to ask Mike Williams. I think they were really all supposed to be written in like 4 years. But who knows? Even 8 years. Say 8 years. 213 songs That's what Wikipedia says. 188 originals and 25 covers. So say 8 years, 213 songs. What's that, like 30 songs a year? If it's only in half that time, 60 songs a year. Basically all of which are hits. That it's a shitload of songs. 1.6 billion records, singles sold in the US. So what do we have in the US? Like 300 million people? So what's that, like 5 records for every baby, every person in the country? 32 number one hits written by Paul McCartney. 26 number one hits written by John Lennon. 19 albums that reached number one in the US. 15 albums that reached number one in the UK. 13 albums certified as multi-platinum in the US. The Beatles won this compilation album. Originally released 13 November 2000. 11/13. Kidding me, right? The album features virtually every number one single the band achieved in the United Kingdom and United States from 1962 to 1970, issued on the 30th anniversary of the band's breakup. It has sold over 31 million copies worldwide, another 311. In addition, listen to this. Where does it say? And this was the best-selling album of the decade between 2000 and 2010. It was the best-selling album of that decade. We're talking, 40, 50 years later here? It's 27 songs. There's a reason they wanted it 27 songs, because it's a 999 number, I assume. 2 notable top number one singles, Please Please Me, Strawberry Fields Forever, were omitted for unknown reasons. And down here at the bottom, this Hey Jude was released in its original full-length version, slightly over 7 minutes. I'm going to do a video in the future, but there's something going on with this 8 minutes, or over 7 minutes, between 7 and 8 minutes. Something going on with this. The bell ring on the moon, the 2 times they hit the moon and they said it rang like a bell, were it peaked in 7 and 8 minutes respectively. I'm just seeing it over and over again. And then it's in Back to the Future on the clocks, and when the bell's ringing, and it's supposedly that's the time it takes sunlight to reach the earth. Like, we wouldn't know the sun burned out for 8 minutes if it burned out. So there's something going on with that between 7 and 8 minutes. I don't know if it's like some kind of cycle of consciousness, or maybe we're like bumped off time, like 8 minutes, 7, 8 minutes. I don't know. I'm going to get into that later, though. But anyway, there's a shitload of songs, okay? Number one hits for these guys wrote. Okay, so then, yeah, like I said, besides the obvious monolith of production on these records, and this still blows my mind to this day. And it's the case with some other records from this era too, like Pink Floyd comes to mind, but nothing, in my opinion, comes close to the Beatles records, and also a lot of the solo records, like All Things Must Pass, the George Harrison records, the Lennon solo records, and Paul McCartney and like Wings and stuff, but especially the Beatles records. When you sit there in front of a good stereo system and listen to these records, it's just mind-boggling, the production on these records. Like, it's like looking at the Great Pyramid of Giza or something. It's thousands, tens of thousands of hours of production. You got to remember these guys are using supposedly like 4-track. All they have everything's tape. You know, these guys are cutting tape. They got to bus everything down to 4 tracks. Do all their mixing and bus it into a final mix with just 4 tracks. And it's just insane. Just the amount of labor, energy went into these things. But regardless, I'm saying besides that, they're good songs. I know they're good songs. And yeah, I'm sure there is some and yes, I'm sure there is some early binary MK encodings in these Beatles records and movies and shows and whatnot. Some MK ultra hexadecimals or some shit. But I'm still saying besides that, they're good songs. Because I got plenty of experience making and consuming good art and bad art and binary mind control overlays. But these have definitely been ramping up nowadays with the digital signal, and it's crazy nowadays. Like, isn't it funny? Isn't it funny how TV keeps getting shittier and shittier, but it keeps getting more addictive? I mean, it's like a digital narcotic in TV nowadays. Like, if I'm somewhere where they're on, I can't look away from these things. It's heavily addictive. I mean, there's no stories anymore, no character development, nothing interesting. Just all quick cut, like, digital crack. There's no substance, and it just keeps getting more and more addictive. And on a side note, just I don't know why, while I was doing this, I was looking at this old good old patents. US 6506148B2, nervous system manipulation by electromagnetic fields from monitors. So, yeah, there is something to this, but, I mean, it doesn't make something good art, you know? As long as I got this up, though, we'll hit a couple little highlights on this real quick, and I'll just say what I think about this type of stuff. Like basic mass MK Psychotronics. I'm sure there's way deeper levels, like to this consciousness tech, projection tech, psychotronic technology. But I'm talking about this base level, just like to give you an emotional stimulus or be addictive. What do we have here? Let's flip that one over real quick. Interesting. Anyway, it's creepy. I have a picture of a real kid in here. Everything else just like schematics, and then they get a real picture of this kid. But, you know, this can be in the source. It can be in a video or tape, or they can overlay it at any point. Like, it could be in a movie or in a show, or like a streaming service could overlay it over everything. So it's super easy to do. This is nothing nowadays to these people. This is like, 50, 60, 70 years old. But, so, just basically, the invention relates to the stimulation of the human nervous system by an electromagnetic field applied externally to the body. So that's it. Stimulation of the human nervous system by an electromagnetic field applied externally to the body. And they explain in here, you don't even necessarily have to be watching the monitor. They can do it just by the light hitting your skin, on your face, on your arm, on your back, whatever. Like, that's why you don't want to sleep in front of a TV. I used to always sleep with the TV on when I was younger. You don't want to do that. The observed effects include, ptosis of the eyelids, relaxation. I gotta blow up of this. Ptosis of the eyelids, relaxation, drowsiness, the feeling of pressure at a centered spot on the lower edge of the brow, seeing moving patterns of dark purple and greenish yellow with the eyes closed, a tonic smile, a tense feeling in the stomach, sudden loose stool, and sexual excitement, depending on the precise frequency used. So this is like, you ever watch like if you've ever watched like a really shitty movie and you know it's a shitty movie, bad writing, bad character development, but you'll get like emotional all of a sudden. Like you'll feel like it'll make you want to cry some part of this terrible movie. Or you'll get angry at something on the TV that's ridiculous, like you shouldn't be angry about. That is, I think, what this stuff is used for. Just to make a production seem to have more, like, just to be more than it is, you know? Computer monitors and TV monitors can be made to emit weak low-frequency electromagnetic fields merely by pulsing the intensity of displayed images. Experiments have shown that the half-hertz sensory resonance can be excited in this manner in a subject near the monitor. The 2.4 hertz sensory resonance can also be excited in this fashion. Is that the exact hertz of a cell phone as well? Or of Wi-Fi? 2.4 hertz? I don't know. I shouldn't say that because I don't know for sure. Hence, a TV monitor or computer monitor can be used to manipulate the nervous system of nearby people. The monitor of a television set emits an electromagnetic field in much the same way as a computer monitor. Hence, a TV may be used to produce screen emissions for the purpose of nervous system manipulation. And I think you can even download like a simple program to do this. You might even be able to find this on. You can try this at home. No, don't do this. This is real scumbag shit. These people are pieces of shit. But anyway, here, and then look at this again. Look at this. With the 8 minutes, 7 to 8 minutes. I can do it bigger like this. So it's talking about when they're running these experiments on people with these MK frequencies from the monitor. The subject experienced several ptosis cycles. That's like losing control of your eyes, like lazy eye, I think. Several ptosis cycles of moderate intensity starting 8 minutes into the experiment run. Why? Why does it peak in 8 minutes? Like, why do the effects begin at 8 minutes? Just like the ringing in the moon peaked at 8 minutes. The light from the sun is 8 minutes. I think they say like in a nuclear, like a total nuclear war situation, quote unquote, that's all bullshit. But supposedly the president has 8 minutes to respond, to decide on the retaliatory strike. There's 8 minutes from your first warning to the end. Something with this 8 minute cycle though. 7 to 8 minutes. So yeah, I'm sure this stuff is in there in the Beatles, but it's not what I'm talking about. Because if you're aware of this, it doesn't really work. Like, if you're aware of this, you don't think a shitty movie is a good movie. You think, man, they've got some kind of weird fucking programming in this show or this movie. It doesn't change bad art into good art, okay? So, I'm saying besides the production, besides the advertising, the hype, besides the MK binaries, besides all of that, it's just good art. They're good songs. So where did all these songs come from? Because the machine, the police, can't write these good songs. And I'm even talking besides like technical musicianship, even like playing or technical ability. I don't even think that makes good art. Like, I view that as a totally separate thing. Like, I appreciate musicianship, virtuosity, but I see that more as like a skill, a machine skill that you've developed, or even raw talent. But it's more like athletics. It's more like watching a sport or something like that. For me, good songs, good art is something different. And I'm going to explain exactly what I mean by that. But you see, I like really shit. I love some bands that are really shitty bands, but it's good art. There's something, it's just something about it. It's good. I love it. It's good art. Shitty bands. There's some awesome virtuoso bands that I love. It's good art. And vice versa. There's some virtuosos, tons of virtuosos that are hacks. It's corny as fuck. It's not good art. It's not good art, you know? And there's shitty bands that suck too. It's not good art and they suck. But the reason I say that is because, like, in the machine world, to the machine, to the screen, all it knows of art is beauty. That is the metric of art to the machine side. The digital side is beauty. But we all enjoy beauty. It's pleasing, like something that tastes good is pleasing, or like sex is pleasing. It's pleasing, and just an objective like sense gratification of your machine, your body machine. It just is good. But beauty is reproducible. Beauty is a formula. You know, beauty is the pi formula, or phi, the golden ratio, the phi formula, or the Fibonacci sequence, a Fibonacci formula, or a set, or a Mandelbrot set. That's beauty. It's reproducible, but it's a machine can understand that. What I mean about good art, the only like organic human metric of good art is honesty. Honesty. That's what I mean by good art. And good art, I would say, has to be true. And something can be very beautiful. Something can be beautiful without being true. A machine can produce something beautiful, but it's not necessarily true. A machine cannot produce something that is honest. Only a human can produce art that is honest. And what I mean by just being honest is, I have to explain what I mean about being honest. I don't mean just something anyone can do. I don't mean just don't lie and you will have created good art. What I'm talking about is like a skill, like a struggle, like an endeavor, and it's really like a battling with the ego, an outwitting of the machine mind. If someone is able to produce a piece of good art, because the honesty of good art is like revealing your internal architecture, the true architecture of your being, or like an exposure of your thought tree, like your actual pattern, the way you process inputs, the way you process data, and the way you process experience. And when an outside observer is able to perceive the similarity with his own internal architecture in good art, then he's not alone while he's experiencing that art. Like, we're always alone. You know, this whole world is life in solitary confinement. Like, we're with people, but they know your image. No one ever really touches, like, the real primary experience of you. But I feel like if you're with good art, you're almost like, it's almost like you don't write good art, or you don't make good art. Like, anyone can. You could fart out a drawing or fart out a song, but I feel like good art, like, you tune into it. It's like a frequency of reality, a feeling that you're able to, like, tune into. And the better you're able to put yourself aside and, like, tune into that, the better art it will be. And someone else, across dimensions of space and time, they can tune in to that same reality frequency, and you're both together there for that time. So your consciousness is kind of joined together as long as you're tuning in to this very specific reality frequency, feeling frequency that the artist was channeling when they made that. And yeah, like, across dimensions, multiple different individuated consciousnesses can be playing the same exact reality frequency across different places and times. And like, the separation of the ego kind of falls down while they're all occupying that same frequency. And the reason I say this is a skill, or like an accomplishment, is because the main goal of the ego, the machine mind, which is the only operating system, like the only command line most people are aware of, even though there are others, higher command lines. But the primary function of the ego is to prevent this exposure of your internal architecture, your true pattern. That is the goal of the ego, to prevent you from exposing that, and, like, maintaining the illusion of your image, your projected image. Because the ego interprets any exposure of your internal architecture as a vulnerability, which is false. That's not true, but that's how it perceives it. The ego operates on fear. The ego is your advertising department, like your propaganda center. And advertising runs the world. Okay? The ego seeks to project an advantageous public image based on fear, based on whatever's been successful in the past for, like, self-preservation or resource acquisition. And the formulas for this, your ego's formulas for how it projects, are different, a little different for everyone. They're different for everyone, depending on the reality canals your consciousness has traveled. Like the shape of your particular river pebble that has been formed by the banks of circumstance. Like, you might run a leader script, a bully script, or a subordinate script, or like a health vitality script to draw people to you, or acquire resources, or project intelligence. There's all different scripts we run. So the ego machine sees this as a potential for harm or loss, because the more knowledge you have of someone's internal architecture, the more predictable they will be to you. You can predict how a new data input, a new experience, will be processed by them, how it will make them feel, how it will cause them to think, which symbolic branches will be activated And you do this by running a sort of simulation, a personality simulation of this entity. You recreate their internal architecture and run it, or you're running it alongside of your own. And this will be an approximation of their processing of data. But the more knowledge you have of their internal architecture, the more accurately you can model it, copy it, or simulate it internally. And in this way, better predict their behavior. You can better predict what their experience of a data input is going to be and how they're going to act. So to boil it all down, the goal of the ego, our main mode of consciousness, is to project an image, a false image that is the most conducive to resource acquisition, power acquisition, sense pleasure, and basically to conceal, to veil all the calculations, all the processing of information, your internal architecture, the true pattern, the true entity that produced this image. Its goal is to conceal all that and show only the resource acquisition, the most advantageous, the false image. That's all it wants people to see. It's like a TV show. It's like a TV show where we only want the world to see the final product, the most flattering angle. And everything that could destroy the illusion, all the behind the scenes work, construction, repeating your lines over and over, the makeup, the costume, none can't be exposed. We don't want anyone to see any of that. We only want them to see the finished product. And it's like everyone's like carrying, imagine a lot of people out in a square of a city or something. They're all carrying around like a cardboard cutout in front of themselves of their false image. And that's all they want people to see. And everyone's turning, contorting, twisting themselves around so to not let anyone see what's behind the cardboard cutout. Like that's what we're doing most of the time. But this is false. This is an illusion. This is a baseless fear because that image doesn't actually exist. It's actually always changing. It's a constantly revolving matrix of data. That's your pattern, your personality. And what I mean by that is, think back to when you were 12 years old. That person is dead. Where is that person? They don't exist. Or you 5 years after that, just take 5-year increments of your life. Like, who is that person? They don't exist. That pattern, that personality, that way of processing data, that formula doesn't exist anymore. But the ego, the machine mind, identifies with this. And it's afraid that it will be vulnerable, predictable, if it exposes its pattern, because it views it. It's like it always has a snapshot and it has no memory. It's like its current pattern that it thinks it will exist forever. The ego doesn't want to change, the machine mind, so it's only a vulnerability if you're always operating from your machine mind fear. If you're always just running the same algorithms based on what has happened in the past out of fear of loss or to acquire resources or self-preservation, that is operating from the machine mind. That's the like mysterious part of real human consciousness, where you're able to make a choice outside of the mechanism, outside of the time dimension. Like, humans are completely unpredictable. They can be when you're operating not in your machine mind, but in your organic consciousness in which choice comes into it. If you're running mechanically, there's no choice. It's an algorithm, so it changes automatically. Like each new input triggers the next thing. It's a formula. But a human, when you really are aware and present and make a choice, but when you're operating from your organic consciousness, you're not predictable. You're always changing. You're always changing. And the mysterious part about human consciousness is like we can make choices that are contrary to our self-interest, like our machine self-interest. Or if not contrary, at least that don't advance it. You know, machines, animals can't do that. All that exists to them is the 666 mechanism, the machine, the material world. That they're not capable of acting contrary to their own self-interest. So anyway, that's what I mean about good art, being honest. It's like a battling to the extent that you're able to reveal, outwit, overcome the ego, the machine mind, and reveal this internal architecture so that consciousnesses can unite and not be alone. They can unite on this honest reality frequency because it's not distorted. It's if you channeled it honestly, okay, but then other consciousnesses are going to be able to recognize. And that's why good art, honest good art, is shocking in a way to the ego. And I don't mean obscene. That's not what I mean by shocking. I mean, some art can be obscene, but that's not what I mean. I mean shocking in the way that shocking, like when you see someone about to reach into a garbage disposal or a wood chipper. The shocking in like a vicarious, your ego vicariously is afraid that they're being exposed to harm. They're being made vulnerable. No, you're exposing your internal architecture. Cover it up. Put your cardboard cutout out. It's shocking in that way. Good art. Shockingly honest. So these are good songs. Besides the production, besides everything, they're just good songs. That's my belief. They seem honest to me, and real people had to have wrote these songs. Okay, so who were they if they weren't these guys? If these guys were a total fabrication of the system, of the machine, of the screen, then where did all these songs come from? Because these songs, any dude could sit on the porch with an acoustic guitar, play the song. It's going to be a good song without this production. So I had a funny little thought, a funny little theory. What if the Beatles are like the KidzBop compilation, cover compilations of like a 1,000-year Simulization that got deleted? You know, when they trash bin these things or start it over, run a new Simulization. And I don't, what if that's what it is? Like they just gleaned like the top hits, the best songs from like a 1,000-year run, and just maybe it's not exactly the same words. They suck. It's never gonna be as good. But have you ever seen these infomercials for KidzBop where they just like real cheesily cover all these hit songs? Or like Now That's What I Call Music 8, Now That's What I Call Music 74, Beatles 1. Is that what the Beatles are? Is like a shitty karaoke cover of the greatest songs from a 1,000-year-long trash bin Simulization? And I don't really know enough about like classical music or anything to know if maybe the same kind of theory could apply to like the huge classical composers, or I don't know, maybe some of these big directors or authors, like Shakespeare is a great candidate for this. Is Shakespeare like the KidzBop compilation of writing or of theater of like 1,000-year trash deleted Simulization. Yeah, one more thing. Look at this. One more thing. While I was just Googling through this shit on like Google, Google answers it for you instead of just actually giving you website results like they're supposed to. They have to steer you in it. But look at this. How did the Beatles write so many good songs? How did the Beatles write so many good songs? Well, Billy, the Beatles wrote so many good songs because they had 3 extremely talented songwriters. Paul McCartney, John Lennon, and George Harrison, who worked hard at songs. They worked hard. That's how they wrote so many good songs. They worked hard at songwriting. Plus, it helped to have a producer the caliber of George Martin around to offer sage advice. And then look at this. Someone snuck this through. Which one of you did this? Someone snuck this through on Quora. This is on the Google answers. Did the Beatles really write all those songs? The Beatles did not write their own songs. Rather, the Beatles were manufactured by a secret Jesuit corporation known as the Tavistock Institute. Their aim? The degeneration of our generation. Thank you, Alexa. Oh, thank you, Siri. So, are the Beatles